English translation 229th contact. Monday 31st July 1989, 0716 hours.
Thus, we have also discussed that. So now I can ask my questions, right?
Certainly.
Once again, it is about the scrape pictures at Nazca in Peru. On the 16th of March 1987, at the 216th contact, you explained that it has been a gigantic religious and astronomical calendar and garden. I explained this information to somebody, and of course new questions resulted therefrom, and I am also interested in the answers. Can you give me additional information about those scrape pictures, their purpose and construction, as well as about the Nazca gods and Nazca humans?
I would like to explain a few things. Each one of the scrape pictures was portrayed by a non-interrupted, continuing line. For their construction, drawing patterns were used which were transferred and enlarged onto the ground until the desired size was reached. The Nazcans perfectly mastered the necessary mathematical calculation methods. With ropes that were attached to standing poles that were held by humans with revolving straps, an improvised circle was built which served to scrape the spots that had already been marked with tools. The light sediment layer under the desert's surface was uncovered, and in this manner the figures and lines were created. The gigantic scrape figures, desert ground that was scraped away, symbolized gods that were revered by the Nazcans in those times. At the same time, the scrape pictures were also an astronomical calendar and a huge astronomical garden, because the figures represented portrayals of the gods who, according to the Nazca people's belief, were seen in the star pictures. For the interpretations of the Nazca star pictures, animals and birds known to the people, and also geometric figures were used which were believed to be seen in the star constellations. On the holy god day that was set at that day when day and night were of equal length, the entire people walked in long marches over the scrape pictures and honored the gods, and they performed rituals and ceremonies to the honor of their great and powerful gods. In order to make their gods peaceful, lower human beings, like slaves, enemies and unwanted ones, etc., were sacrificed and killed in such a manner that they were bound onto special altars, and a heavy wooden thorn or stone thorn was driven into the forehead and the skull, and a cactus thorn was driven through the lips to shut up their mouth for all times and to silence them. Those ceremonies were executed by the priests, who were holy men and who led a prosperous life. The priests were also responsible for performing the sacred rituals and ceremonies on the scrape pictures, which, however, could be entered by the people not only on the holy day of the gods, but also during all other times, and used for private acts of worship. As a rule, the Nazcans were people with high skulls, which means that their skulls showed an exceptionally long skull form, which was not of original origin. This skull form was artificially produced. As long as the skull was still formable, it was restricted and bound with ground metallic, stony, and wooden plates, forcibly leading to a skull of long form and resulting in an oblong deformation. This procedure was even started with newborns when they were 1 week old. Everything was not an ideal of beauty, but a tribute to the gods, to give them obsequious reverence. Only those Nazcans were permitted to have and wear the oblong skull form who were of higher class, that is to say, about 85% of the population. The remaining 15% were lower people, who had to perform slave duty and similar tasks, and who were looked upon as social misfits, etc., and whose well-being or non-well-being, and therefore their life laid in the hands and will of the higher ones, and especially of the priests.
This explanation should be enough. Thank you. Then here is another question regarding the advanced culture of the Mayans and their extinction or downfall, respectively. Can you report about this? I suppose that you have knowledge about the history of the Mayans, yes?
I have, in fact, occupied myself with it, and know some things about these concerns, at least the things that are known to us in general. The Mayas are Indian peoples and language families in southern Mesoamerica. I have provided you with information about it before, but obviously you want to know more about it. Thus it is. Maya as a language exists in southern and northeast Mexico, in Guatemala, Honduras, and Belize, with more than 2 million people who are speaking that language. If spatial cultural criteria are taken into account, there must be a differentiation between those people who live in scattered settlings in the woodland of the tropical lowland, and those people in the colonial Spanish-oriented village communities of the cool temperate highlands. The Yucatec belong to the first category and are living in the Mexican states Yucatan, Quintana Roo and Campeche, as well as Lacandons and Chorty, etc., Caquels, Quiche, and Tsutu Hills are belonging to the second category. Regarding the hierarchy of political offices, it can be said that in the high regions there is a cult brotherhood, while in the lowlands the organizational form is that of groups of relatives. Some pursue very intensive clearing through fire, whereby beans, pumpkins, and maize are the principal crops that are cultivated. Those who are living in the forests are oriented towards extensive agriculture. The significantly advanced culture of the Mayas developed since the year 2321 before Emmanuel's birth, and it formed the actual traditional Maya religion into the state religion. Today's Maya Indian Catholicism is riddled with elements of their old customary traditional religion. The Mayas' descendants of today are still venerating the old gods of their ancient religion, which they elevate into a position of Christian saints. Nevertheless, the doings of the distant descendants are still determined by spirit powers. Shamanistic rituals regarding the healing of the sick, the sowing and oracle calendars still belong to the given order. But if we view the time before Columbus, the following can be said. In those times, the Maya were the holders of very highly advanced culture whose heyday began about 300 years after Emmanuel's birth and lasted for about 460 years, before drought catastrophes broke over the land due to climatic changes, caused bad disaster, and claimed 14,392,108 human lives in the course of only about 150 years. 50 years after Emmanuel's birth, the Maya culture found its total end through the Spanish conquests, whereby the conquerors committed terrible inhumanness, murder, crimes of all kinds, and cruelties without an end. And all of this was done in the name of the Spanish royal house, as well as in the name of God, and therefore in the name of the Christian religion. Well, at that time, there happened a spatial relocation of the cultural heyday from the south to the north, which lead to the last end of the classical Maya culture. That actual relocation, and the actual reason for the downfall of the Maya culture, can be traced back to earlier causes that were not within the power of the Spaniards. Actually, forces of nature were responsible for the final fall. That is to say, gigantic natural catastrophes through droughts, but also through epidemics, famine, and wars. The most powerful causes were 3 drought periods. Back in the year 754 after Emmanuel's birth, the first one began, slowly developed, and later, after about 50 years, became the first drought catastrophe that lasted about 10 years. Because of the severity of that drought, famines spread over wide areas, which claimed many deaths. No longer in control because of hunger, children and old people were killed to serve as food, as had also been the case in the land of Egypt, when droughts and famines ruled. There were only about 40 years after the Great Drought, when the land and the people could recover somewhat, until another heavy drought covered the land, and when the same evil became the order of the day again, as had been the case during the first drought. This period of drought did not last as long as the first one, because after a little bit more than 4 years, it ended. But also during this drought, many human beings died, and again human beings were killed and eaten, mainly children and old persons, as had been the case during the first drought. As the land was recovering very slowly after the first drought, and did not become fully usable for the cultivation of food, everything became even worse after the second drought. That part of the soil that was still usable brought forth even less food. And so the people were living in want and had to live frugally during the following years and decades, until a third drought period broke over the land that lasted for another nearly 7 years. And once again, as a last solution for the hungry people, they killed and ate their children and old people. Finally, this last great catastrophe led to the breakdown of the advanced Maya culture and brought its final ruin.
Thanks. Your explanation says more than I expected. Then I still have another question regarding CFCs. Concerning this, you once told me that certain gases, which are stored under the bottom of the sea and which rise up, cause even greater damage to the ozone layer than CFCs. Now I no longer know what gas this was and out of what it arises.
It concerns methane gas, which is stored as methane hydrate under the sea.
At that time, you said that often enormous clouds of gas bubbles of this methane gas detach from the seabed, like, for example, in large masses in the Bermuda Triangle. These gas bubbles then rise to the sea's surface, where they form huge whirlpools, through which ships sink into the sea when they run into them, as the ships, due to the numerous gas bubbles in the water, are no longer carried by the water. If the gas clouds then ascend over the sea and fly into airplanes, then the methane gas becomes ignited by the engines or jets, whereby tremendous explosions arise and tear the airplanes into the smallest pieces. Is this right as such?
That is of correctness.
I might have to ask about it again later, because since my breakdown, I forget some things again and again. But now, another question that also has reference to a natural phenomenon, namely to lightning. Although most flashes of lightning shoot out into the outer layers of the atmosphere, and partly even into the outermost layers and beyond that, as I saw several times, when you took me far beyond the earthly atmospheric layers, about 5% or so still shoot down to the ground and cause all sorts of disaster. And since there are more and more people as a result of overpopulation, more and more people are also hit by lightning, which usually has deadly consequences, with few exceptions. Now, it is always said that lightning would hit the highest structures in each case because these would attract the lightning. So even trees, mountains, and buildings, etc. Also, it is said that a person in the open can protect himself or herself against lightning by lying down on the ground, or by putting themselves into a squatting position in such a manner that they pull their knees up to their chest. Thus, a person should offer the smallest attack area to the lightning. Does this correspond to the facts, or is this an inane story? And are there actually different types of lightning, and how do these arise?
It does not correspond to the correctness with regard to the fact that only high objects are struck by lightning, just as it does not correspond to the correctness that a human cannot be struck by lightning if he or she is lying on the ground or is in a crouching position. It is true, however, that there are different types of lightning. Thus, the following is to be explained. When thunderstorms emerge, these take place in so-called thunderstorm cells, in which differently sized densities of space charge arise.
Once this concentration of space charge reaches a field strength that exhibits values of several hundred kVm,
which you can write as follows, as I have noted it to you here, 100 kVm, on the basis of ice particles or water droplets. Then leading discharges or conducting discharges form the leading flashes of lightning, thereby causing a reaction that triggers a discharge of lightning sparks. If the flashes of lightning go from cloud to cloud, then this is called cloud-to-cloud lightning. This creates a balance between positively and negatively charged cloud centers or thunderstorm cells. Then there is the cloud-to-space lightning, which shoots out, under certain circumstances, into space and discharges there. Then, the two types of cloud-to-ground lightning and ground-to-cloud lightning are still to be mentioned. Ground-to-cloud lightning is easily recognizable because it descends from the clouds to the ground, and to be sure, with easily recognizable leading flashes of lightning, which have many branches. Leading lightning contains a so-called charge tube, which descends to the ground and is filled with a negative charge of a cloud of the thunderstorm cell. The negative cloud-to-ground lightning is the most frequently occurring lightning, apart from the cloud-to-cloud lightning and cloud-to-space lightning. The positive cloud-to-ground lightning originates from the lower, positively charged area of the flash. Positive cloud-to-ground lightning flashes, which originate from the upper positively charged center, are relatively rare. Such flashes of lightning occur almost exclusively at the end of a respective active phase of a thunderstorm cell. The positively charged center only builds up when the negatively charged center is nullified. Such a positive discharge results then through a single and very powerful lightning flash, which descends to the ground. It is also to be noted that ground-to-cloud lightning flashes with branches shoot up into the clouds, whereby leading flashes of lightning shoot up from the earth, from mountaintops, towers, and other tall buildings, etc., into the clouds. With cloud-to-ground lightning, a cylindrical tube shoots down to the ground from the negatively charged center of the thundercloud, which is filled with the cloud's charge. In addition, the tube varies in its diameter and can exhibit several tens of meters. Moreover, connected to it is a very thin and approximately 1 centimeter thick, highly ionized plasma core. This leading flash of lightning shoots down to the ground in a jerky and zigzagging manner, and indeed at a speed of about 300 kilometers per second. The jerky pre-shootings of the leading flashes of lightning occur in steps of several 20 meters, whereby the interim times of a step move to others within the range of a microsecond. Once the tip, the head of the leading flash of lightning, has reached a distance of between 10 and several hundred meters, the electric field strength of the objects that are stationary on the ground, such as buildings, towers, and trees, as well as mountaintops, increases in such a way that the electrical stability of the air is exceeded, and then so-called catching discharges go out of the objects, and the head of the leading flash of lightning shoots toward and meets with these. With this, the point of impact of the lightning on the ground is also determined, namely a mountaintop, a tower or tree, some building, an animal or a human, out of which the catching discharge has gone. This also explains that even a human being emits such catching discharges, but with him or her, the fact still remains that he or she generates electromagnetic swinging waves on through their brain, which reach several meters of expansion, which send out catching discharges, and which form very strong attraction points for the head of a leading flash of lightning. So it is also of no use to remain in a lying or crouching position in open terrain, when thunderstorms take place that are associated with lightning. Real protection for human beings only occurs in caves or in enclosed buildings, or in completely closed vehicles and aircraft, etc. If the head of a leading flash of lightning and a catching discharge collide, then the catching discharge shoots into the leading lightning tube at about 100,000 kilometers per second and, within a few milliseconds, allows the stored charge of lightning to discharge to the ground or to the object out of which the catching energy has gone. This, then, is the moment when the actual lightning discharge becomes visible, which lights up very brightly and dazzles the eye. The spark channel created by the leading flash of lightning is heated very strongly, whereby the main flash reaches a temperature of several tens of thousands of degrees Celsius. At the same time, the pressure of the flash rises to about 100 times the normal atmospheric pressure and explodes, through which the crash of thunder arises. Due to the sudden, main discharge of the leading lightning tube, a so-called surge current shoots, within milliseconds, into the object struck by lightning, namely a tree, a building or a tower, a mountain, a ship, airplane, automobile, animal, or person, etc. The surge current of positive ground-to-cloud lightning has a similar course. But with its discharge from the upper positively charged center in the thundercloud, the surge current usually lasts about 10 times longer than with cloud-to-ground lightning. Positive cloud-to-ground lightning also transports in itself a much greater energy charge than what is the case with the negative surge current. This is also the reason why positive cloud-to-ground lightning is much more dangerous than just negative cloud-to-ground lightning. But that, dear friend, should suffice as an explanation. In addition to this, there would actually be an entire course to explain in this regard.
That is certainly enough, I think. I did not want to be instructed in such detail. Thank you very much.
Everything is complete. The dates and stories of the biblical traditions are truthfully based on legends, deliberate lies and falsifications, and a fraudulently created false and fantasized chronicle. This also applies to the dates of the ancient and real prophets Jeremiah, Isaiah, Elijah, and Enoch. The true dates of these prophets are the following. Converted to the present Christian calendar, note, per later contacts 677 and 678, Ptah states that the order of names and dates was actually erroneously switched by Quetzal. That is to say, the first prophet was Enoch, then Eliah, Josiah, Jeremiah, and is opposite to what they should have been. A new published edition of this contact block will reflect this change. Name, born day, month, year. Died, son of Jeremiah, 9th February 662, BC 3rd September 580, BC High Priest Hilkias to Anathoth. Josiah 7th February 772, B.C. 5th May 690, B.C. Amaz at Sidon. Eliah 5th February 891, B.C. 4th June 780, B.C. Josias to Gilad-Gilead, Tisbitia. Eliah was on 7.4. 842 B.C. with a beam ship brought to Srinagar, Landia. Enoch 3rd February 9308 B. C. 1st January 8942 B. C. Cretan of the Play Aaron. The birth times of the prophets were the following. Jeremiah 11:23 hours, Isaiah 10:44 hours, Elijah 11:02 hours, and Enoch 11:01 hers.
Thank you. But what about Jeremiah's predictions, which are not prophecies?
I had to convert these into today's German language understanding. which means that the predictions now sound like this. In modern times, when the prophet of modern times spreads his teaching, the time of the great transformation has begun, which will carry itself from the second millennium far into the third millennium after the birth of the prophet Emmanuel. And when the second millennium ends and the third millennium has begun, human beings will be so blinded by gold and all material values that they will count thalers everywhere in all lands. And even when they look up to the sky, they will see only gold, precious stones, and thalers in the stars. They will erect places of worship and pay homage to an insubstantial God and to human beings who will be elevated to saints by human beings. The places of worship of the insubstantial deity will become trading places for merchants and money changers. The feudatories, landowners, etc., who give all kinds of achievements and dwellings and many inventions in feud Easter provided things, places on condition of services, fealty, bondage, etc., become money-grubbing usurers. And it will be that the judicial authorities will turn their justice into injustice, and will no longer punish the wrongdoers for their evil deeds, but will reward them because they impose far too small punishments on them. Thus, the great fire of iniquity shall smolder and burn, and shall also give every hand to fornication, so that it shall not fail, that every city shall be a place of degenerate fornication. And also the children and their children shall live in Ausartung, and shall become a cloud of embers, burning and destroying all things. They will raise the old blood-dripping flags and spread terror and countless deaths. The powerful of the world will cruelly abuse their might and let countless innocent human beings be killed. They will convert the stones of life into deadly weapons to kill human beings en masse in great numbers and destroy nature. The unreasonableness of human beings will become so rampant with the appearance of the modern prophet through the procreation of offspring that the earth, the sky, the seas, the forests, steppes, and deserts, as well as the mountains, will be so populated that no human being will be able to take an unobserved step, and therefore everyone will come into conflict with everyone. The human being will assert his or her power and command nature and life, striving for the power of creation, for he or she will break down all boundaries in every respect and transcend them. But everything will not go on indefinitely, because one day everything will turn around and be directed against the human beings. Like a drunken ruler, he or she will suddenly begin to waver and run in fear like a blind horse. He or she will ride himself like a mount, giving himself or herself the spurs and the whip into the confusion, into a forest of error, at the end of which the path is dark, barren, and deadly, and leads irrecoverably into a deep abyss. It will be the time when in all lands and at all points of the earth gigantic buildings and towers will be erected, reaching up to the heavens. And the human beings will live and work in these towers and buildings. There will also be gigantic cities in which human beings will live out their lives as the fertile fields become empty, but on which buildings and towers will be erected because the space for living will become ever smaller. And it will be that there will no longer be any truthful law except that of the individual human being and that of the individual groups. Thus many will turn into barbarians who will be in the cities and who will terrorize the righteous. Moreover, in the new age, there will be so many human beings that there will no longer be enough bread for all, nor water, which will become increasingly scarce. But the human being will also become mad and fanatically run after many games, which, however, will soon no longer be enough for him, which is why he will venture into other games, through which life will become a plaything of madness. These deadly games will be like deadly fire when they are lit, and the human being recklessly stakes his life on them just to satisfy his madness through things that are meant to whip him up. When the modern-day prophet appears and the third millennium after the prophet Emmanuel makes its entrance, a great many human beings will be struck by hunger and thirst. While some will lose their lives through very great heat, many others will be blue from cold and harassed by great waters.
In general, human beings fall into fear of natural phenomena, and many wish to see another world.
And many fall into fear because the powerful of the world degenerate and wage vicious wars to get hold of lands and natural resources. They will be the hypocrites who presume to claim that they are acting in the name and by the command of a god in order to consolidate their greed for might. In the time of the modern prophet, human beings will fall prey to all kinds of god cults, through which they will completely lose their inner freedom. The cults will become large trading groups created and led by self-appointed gods. But truly, they are only merchants of lies, deceit, and illusions, who instill into human beings their dangerous poison of deception, whereby they become believers in and dependent on unreal things. But in the end, the poison is extremely dangerous, for it destroys thoughts and feelings, whereby the human being becomes indifferent and cold, both towards himself or herself, and also towards their neighbor. And those who mix the poison with their thoughts and feelings to the point of fanaticism will be like wild beasts. They will threaten their fellow men, kill and rape them, and they will rob, extort, and torture them. So this kind of human being will aus arten get badly out of control of their good human nature to such an extent that life will become a daily horror for all other human beings. When the modern-day prophet is in his work, human beings in general will be bent on gaining as much pleasure for themselves as they possibly can. This enjoyment also refers to man and woman, who both aus arten, see above, and outdo each other to such an extent that the man will repudiate his wife and remarry as often as is possible for him. And he will be submissive to same-sex and two-sex harlotry, and thereby bring deadly plagues upon the world and among all humankind. The woman will be as licentious as the man, for she will walk lustfully through the streets of the cities and take any man who happens to come running. But not only will fornication be immeasurably great, but also foolishness and ignorance, which will also spread to the children. So not only will adult women bear children without knowing or naming the name of the father, but there will also be children who bear children. Thus there will be no father and no master for the respective child, who can teach, instruct, educate, and guide him or her. All decency and respect, all sense of honor and tradition, and all custom and honor will be lost. The human being becomes alienated from their neighbor and, in spite of the great mass of human beings, will be alone among them. The laws of order and honor will be forgotten, just as if they had never existed. So also the ancient proclamation will be forgotten that the human being can again become a savage if he or she should forget all the human and life values. And with the coming of the modern prophet, fornication will become so rampant that the father will lewdly and incestuously abuse his daughter and the mother her son. Fornication between man and between woman and woman will become rampant. Also, that the old man and the young man will abuse and rape the child. And all this will happen in the sight of all human beings, against which, however, the judiciary will hardly do anything, but will only pronounce insufficient, slightest punishments. Thus, the blood of families will become impure through inbreeding, because evil will spread from bed to bed. And many diseases and pestilences will spread through fornication, whereby the human bodies will take in all the rottenness of the earth, the faces will be tormented, and the limbs emaciated. True love will no longer be spoken of, but only carnal and sexual love, whereby the word love will become the greatest threat to all those human beings who can only perceive their knowledge concerning themselves through the flesh. When the modern-day prophet speaks of the code and of the oath and the law, only a few faithful will rally around him, and he will not want to be heard by most human beings. Only a few will rush after the truth when he spreads the teaching of the Spirit, because for the many his voice and teaching will fall away as in the desert. On the other hand, the murky and powerful waters of the great world-spanning false, erroneous and fanatical God cults will spread, and false alleged God envoys, divines, exalted ones, masters, redeemers, deliverers and salvation kings will do their pernicious work with lies and deceptive work, with deceit, fanaticism, greed for gold and charlatanry, and gather innumerable thoughtless believers around them. And many among the misguided fanatical believers will carry weapons as never before, and with them they will kill and murder in even multiplied numbers, while others, as individuals or in small or larger groups, will seek self-death in their delusion of faith. With all these, the word of the modern prophet will fall flat as in the wilderness when he speaks of right and law, of the teaching of the truth, of the teaching of the Spirit and of true love, of peace, freedom, harmony, and justice. His words will be fierce and sharp, and he will teach that the fallible will incur punishment through themselves in their erroneous campaigns. When the prophet of the modern age comes, and human beings honor him from the stars, a roar of death will rise over the world, and deadly weapons will crack in all lands. Fanatical terrorists, forming themselves into great groups, will be hunted down by legions of soldiers. Fear and terror will reign, and the mighty of the lands will make terror their own and become despots and tyrants. They all become barbaric, faithless, full of vengefulness, wicked and savage, while the truth deniers wreak havoc in their cult houses in the cities, and cult-powerful men in the heart of the great city in the land of the shoals presume to be worshipped as representatives of God and as holy. These truthless of all God cults will have great might over their believers, exploit them, and lead them endlessly astray. And through these cults the time will come when there will be no more order and no more rules, and hatred and cultic fanaticism will spread over the world like a blazing fire. The terrorists and the legions of soldiers will massacre countless innocent human beings, and the cultists will persecute and strangle those who seek and know the truth. The hatred and the insane belief in God, the vengefulness, cruelty, mercilessness, and destructiveness will be of each and all. The world will resound with mighty, great, and merciless war cries. Cities will be destroyed, and the blood of human beings will flow in rivers. And the thank you for the prophet of modern times for revealing the truth will be that he, like all prophets at all times, will be misjudged, blasphemed, denied, and murderously threatened of life, attacked and hindered and slandered in the spreading of his word of truth with evil machinations. Also his words of truth and his teaching will be stolen by many wicked ones, by liars and deceivers, and will be distorted in their own favor, as will never have happened to a prophet before. The dishonorable will belittle his honor and claim it for themselves, and unlawfully make great profit from it. When the prophet of the new times begins to work, human beings will no longer seek the truth and will no longer judge by the truth, for by the laws and faith of the cults of God, they will judge by their blood and by their faith. Human beings will no longer listen to the lamentations of the aged, nor to the weeping of suffering children. Old people, women and children will be disregarded. The old people will be hidden in old people's homes. The women and children will be abused and driven to whoring. And no one will be there to protect them, neither from the slave abusers and pimps, nor from the legions of soldiers and terror fanatics who will descend upon them. Hatred and vindictiveness will flood the earth, whose human beings will live in a mistaken belief of a dubious peace which they hope to attain in vain. For worldwide war will flood the earth, sparing no one, not the aged, not the children and not the women, not the sick and injured, not the righteous and not the peacemakers. Legions of soldiers and terror fanatics will destroy homes and go murdering, pillaging and plundering through the countryside and cities, killing and destroying everything that gets in their way. When one is gone, the next will follow and do even greater mischief. And the eyes of human beings will be closed, so that they will not see the abused and raped children and women. The modern-day prophet will know what has happened, is happening, and will happen on all ends of the earth. He will show that in many lands men, women and children are dying of hunger, that their bones pierce the skin, and inflamed eyes and open sores mark their bodies, on which flies and other poisonous vermin feed en masse. But he will also show that human beings are hunted down like mangy dogs and like rats, tortured and beaten to death, dismembered or otherwise killed. But only a few will listen to him. For the great mass of human beings do not want to see all the abominations, and so they will turn their faces away from it and throw the words of the prophet to the wind. But he will be unwavering and will powerfully lift up his word of truth and carry it out into the world. Only a few humans, however, will hear his voice in full and align their thoughts and feelings according to his words. For in the time of the modern prophet, human beings in general will be so hostile to fellow human beings and to life itself that they will only care about themselves. As alms, he will give his neighbor only a tiny portion of a split thaler, while he himself sleeps on sacks full of gold and thalers. But even the tiny part of the split taler which he gives with one hand he will take back several times with the other hand, for he will give nothing in vain. If his mind is not filled with profit when he gives, then he will be after soothing his guilty conscience with it. In modern times, the human being will also trade with everything, so that nothing will be given without payment. Everything, even the tiniest, will have a price attached to it, even the grass that grows on the ground, the animal, the water, and even the human being himself or herself, who will be valued according to his or her performance. Barter will be abolished, and truthfully nothing will be given as a gift, for everything and anything will be subjected to trade and sold. But man will lose his or her own value, namely that of the human being, whereby his or her value will only be that of their goods and chattels, and the weight of their own flesh and bones. Everything will be taken from him or her that makes them a human being, for nothing in them will be sacred any more, neither their life, nor their thoughts and feelings, nor their body and blood. If he or she dies, then not only will their material legacy be fought over, but also their mortal shell, their blood, and their entrails, because in modern times everything will also have its price in this area. Thus human beings will be slaughtered like animals for the sake of blood and entrails, and will be torn apart and desecrated like carrion. The prophet of the modern age will mourn, because human beings have changed and destroyed the face of the earth and are headed for total annihilation. But he will also point out with harsh words of truth that the human being is not the master and liege lord of the earth and its mountains. Streams, rivers, lakes, seas, meadows, fields, wetlands, and forests. And he will show that the human being plows the ground and the sky with mighty machines for the purpose of profit, and also makes furrows in the lakes, rivers and seas with great ships in order to wage wars worldwide, to bring great masses of human beings into other countries, and to exterminate all aquatic animals for the purpose of procuring food. This will also spread diseases and epidemics throughout the world, carried away by the countless travelers who will spread to all lands. Similarly, through food and trade goods from all over the world, all kinds of animals and plants will be carried and transported to other countries, whereby they will settle in the foreign lands and disturb and adversely affect the course of nature. But a worse time is yet to come, for through the fault of human beings, large parts of the earth will become naked and barren. The great forests will fall victim to the greed for gold and money of human beings, and the air will burn because of man-made artificial agents. The waters will become brackish and poisonous and foul-smelling and scarce for drinking. Human beings will exploit the earth's treasures without limit, thoughtlessly and consciencelessly, and exhaust the earth's wealth to the last bushel. The whole world will be polluted by manifold filth, whereby all life will wither. And the hatred of human beings will increase immeasurably, whereby there will also be no difference in one's own family. Little by little he or she will become like a lonely and wild beast, seeking the life of his or her victims. With the appearance of the modern prophet, 1937 years after the birth of the prophet Emmanuel, the time will begin when children will be sold and abused for fornication. So many degenerates will take pleasure in their young skin. Many will be driven to fornication or strangled after lewd abuse or killed by poisons and weapons. But it will also be that very many children will be homeless and live on the streets, where they will fall into the hands of traffickers who will kill them for their entrails and cannibalize them like animals. Others will become targets for murdering henchmen of the authorities, and still others will be treated like servile animals. The human being becomes crude and violent, and in his or her indifference to the weak, they will also forget the sanctity and weakness of children, exploit them by labor, and ravish them through fornication. The secret of the children's integrity will be broken and destroyed when they are trained like little dogs, and led like lambs to the sacrificial stone to be slaughtered and bled for all kinds of gain. The human being will no longer know mercy and justice, but will only see their own profit and advantage, and they will only live in cruelty. He or she will become a prisoner of their own gaze, of their own thoughts and feelings, and of their own speech they will be drunk, and will not notice how they go more and more astray and to ruin. He or she will take lies, images and reflections of the cults of God and their rulers and servants for the truth of the world, for he or she will be like a patient and stupid sheep with whom can always be done what pleases. But the consequences for this will not be absent. For like beasts of prey and birds of prey, fanatical wretches of other cults will herd the one like the other into flocks in order to be able to push them more easily into the abyss and into death. And it will be that the one human being will be set against the other in order to be able to rob and skin them better, and to get their goods and chattels. But if they survive, They will be deprived of their thoughts and feelings and freedom and peace, and often even of their reason. If the time of the new prophet comes, then the kings and emperors and otherwise all the rulers and the mighty ones of the god cults will be without the truthful knowledge of the creation and its laws. They will rule wickedly, bloodthirstily, and with lies and deceit, and will command all the innocent, idle, and ignorant multitudes. Lying and deceit will be their craft, and from their believers they will hide their true faces behind masks and keep their real intentions secret. But the time is coming when they will be overthrown. But it will be that they will decide the fate of human beings and of everything and everyone, and the common human being will be excluded from the inner assemblies of their own order. Thus it will no longer be the human beings as a group who will decide, but the superiors alone, who will lead their regiment at the top and will be horrendously rewarded for their outrages. The individual human being will, in reality, no longer be free, but a serf of the rulers and superiors, even if he or she believes they enjoy freedom. Alone, on the other hand, only those will rise from savage regions who are not slaves to a faith in God, and not to an obedience to authority. But they will first be cursed and damned and accused of delusion, and many a one will be defeated and burned alive or otherwise killed. When the modern prophet has come, the human beings in the world will become as numerous as the people of an anthill. And if a stick is driven into the people, then they will run around and trample each other to death and crush each other like annoying vermin. The human beings will buzz about like confused insects, and great movements of human beings will drift from one place or country to another, traveling or fleeing from war, death, and terror. The races of men will mingle unrestrainedly and breed half-breeds, spreading many diseases, pestilences, and all manner of human evils, vices, and wickednesses throughout the world. The cults of the one gods take away the believers of the others or mix with each other. The god cults and their superiors and their rulers and believers will preach and promise freedom, love, and peace, but everywhere their talk will be only lies and falsehood, for in their hearts they have only hatred and revenge, retaliation and robbery and plunder. The god cults themselves and their believers will make enemies and wage war against each other. Human beings will transgress all boundaries, and the young will have gray hairs like the old. The way of nature will be forsaken by the human beings, and families will be torn apart. They will scatter all over the world, and nothing will be able to unite them. The modern age will be a completely different world, and the human being will be a Wesson without support and security. He or she will go in all directions without truthful guidance and bring misfortune upon himself or herself. He or she will no longer have any stability and will constantly stand at an abyss into which he or she threatens to fall. At the time of the new prophet in the second millennium after Emmanuel's birth, until far into the third millennium, human beings will no longer submit to the laws of creation, but will submit to unreal laws and even more unreal gods and their cults. He or she will try to control his life like a mount, and they will want to determine the sex of the children in the wombs of the women. Thus they will also kill all the children in the womb whom they do not want. The human being will consider himself to be the creation, whereby especially the rulers and all kinds of powerful people will want to gain eternal life. And it will be they who will usurp all the high offices and the best land, as well as all the most beautiful women and men, in order to make them their lewd objects of lust. The poor, the old, and the weak will be treated like bad cattle, and their miserable huts, old people's homes, and hospitals will be like foul-smelling prisons for them, in which they will languish and rot. And it will be that in them and in all human beings, abysmal fear will eat like poison into the thoughts and feelings, into the heart and into the head. Everything will also rest in the addiction to usury, profit and power. For this will be a dark and secret order whose law will be hatred and revenge, and its weapon the poison by which gold and money, possessions and goods, lust and vice and pleasure will be sought. This poison will spread as dominion over the whole earth, and their servants and henchmen will be bound together by a poisonous kiss of blood, which will forge them together. The poor and the old, the righteous and the weak will be at their mercy and will obey them, if they have to be servile, unwillingly or unwittingly, to the rulers and the mighty of the lands and the god cults. The only laws will be those dictated by the rulers, kings, emperors, and other powerful people, and by the chiefs and superiors of the god cults in their shadowy realms. Thus the poison will reach down to the individual human being, poison him or her, and force them into an erroneous belief in God. And this poison of the god cults will be very manifold and spread over the world in such a manner that the human beings will absorb the poison under their souls when they wander over the earth. When the modern prophet begins his work, the time will come when many human beings will watch all the happenings of the world impassively and without feeling. Many will sit with folded arms and walk along with empty eyes and deaf ears, unaware of what is going on around them and what they see and hear. They will no longer have wise men with whom they can train themselves in knowledge and wisdom, so they will be like a blacksmith without a forge in which to strike their iron. And they will be like laborers in the fields who no longer have a field to till. The human beings will be like a seed that no longer finds fertile soil in which it could take root and germinate. They will become hopeless and humiliated, and stripped of honor and rights, they will wander aimlessly. The youngest and the oldest will be without a home, and will live on the streets and in misery. And for many, the only way left open for their salvation will be to commit terror, to steal their neighbor's possessions, to deceive and cheat, or to go to war. And for all their misery and distress, they will hate their lives and fight viciously against themselves. This will also be the time when human beings will be threatened and afflicted by evils arising from diseases of animals and from evil experiments of human beings, and so also from diseases of the water and of the earth. But the human beings will also storm into heaven with strange companions, and from there bring deadly diseases back to the earth. And on the earth the human beings will destroy much through war and terror, as well as through lust for power and unreasonableness. But they will resurrect it, and will want to preserve all that has been spared. But it will be so that the fear seethes in the human beings of the days that lie before them, because they augur evil. But it will be too late for fear, for there will be great destruction, and the earth will be covered with desolation far and wide. But mighty waters will also become deeper and deeper, and at certain days and times they will flow so mightily that they will sweep everything away like a deluge, destroying and annihilating everything, and claiming innumerable human lives. The air and the sun will become poisoned and dangerous through the destructiveness of human beings, eating away at the bodies of the weak. When the modern prophet born, a worldwide war will shake the earth and claim so many human lives as never before in any event. And henceforth more and more wild waters will rise, volcanoes will wreak great havoc, and earthquakes will shake many lands and cause great cities to perish. The weather will assume apocalyptic proportions, and the death of human beings in these events will be immeasurable. So everything will be threatened and destroyed that has not been built or provided with security by the counsel of the wise. Mountains will fall down, and mudslides will bury villages. Human beings and animals and all the goods and chattels of the human beings on the mountain slopes and in the valleys, while in other places the ground will tear itself up out of the depths of the earth. But the human being will not turn to wisdom and deny that very many of the events will be due to their fault. So they will continue in unreasonableness, for they will be stubborn and possessed by pride. They will not listen to the warnings of the prophet, nor to the warnings of the earth, which call out to them. So for a long time there will be no end to the evils, whereby fires and tremors from the depths of the earth will destroy the cities and villages. And as in war, the poor and the barbarians, in spite of the legions of soldiers, will plunder the riches and all the goods left by the human beings. The eyes of the soldiers will be blind against plunder, for they themselves will be plunderers. If the modern prophet is born, artificial substances invented by human beings will enter the air and destroy it in the upper strata. Thus the sun will burn the earth and strike the human beings with the black frass, which will bring death to many. The air will no longer protect the earth and its life from the heat and fire of the sun, for the air will only be a curtain full of holes, so that the burning light of the sun will consume the human being's eyes and skin, causing them to go blind or die. Like boiling water, the lakes and seas will foam up, rivers will dry up, and cities will be buried. Cities, villages, meadows, and forests will fall victim to the madness of human beings when they artificially dam up huge rivers and lakes in order to gain power from them. And they will not consider that in so doing they are harassing and tormenting the earth, which will defend itself with earthquakes, wild waters, the raging of volcanoes, and with storms and all kinds of other things. Whole landscapes and countries, as well as islands and even whole continents, will disappear. But the humans will have only a short memory, so they will only flee to the heights and begin to rebuild everything. Very quickly they will forget what has happened, and so they will continue in the old rut. Human beings will be dazzled by mirages which they bring to life and by which they deceive their senses, thinking they are touching something which is not at all. So they will tread paths that only the eyes can see, but not the mind and not reason. And this path will be a dream that thus becomes reality. Thus it will come about that the humans will no longer be able to distinguish between that which is and that which is not. Many false labyrinths will open up to them, in which they will become confused and lost. Many god cults and subcults of god cults will arise and mislead and exploit the believers. And those who can devise and awaken all the illusions for the human beings will lie and deceive the stupid and gullible and play an evil game of deception with them. And there will be many who will fall prey to the illusions of the cults of God and their superiors and become slaves, so that they will be like submissive dogs. When the time of the new prophet comes, then the human beings will become greater and greater in number, and they will no longer beget their offspring in the normal way, but by interfering with the woman's procreative and childbearing powers. And so the human being will also create new human beings from tiny parts of a human being, as he will do with the animals. Human beings and animals will cry out for special food and for meat in great masses. Like ones will eat like ones when the human being transforms the flesh and bones of human beings and animals into fine forms and makes food out of them. And just as animals will eat their own kind, humans will consume their flesh and eat their own parents and siblings. The animals will no longer be in the hands and under the protection of human beings, for they will only be bred in great masses and under undignified living conditions, and then miserably slaughtered. The human being will change the animals according to their will, and also make hermaphrodites out of them, inflict endless torment on them, and not care about their never-ending suffering. They will interfere with the nature of animals and shape them as they please. The human being will change the laws of life, and thus also himself or herself. The human being, who formed their origin into a living being of progress, will no longer be their own image, but a creature of terror. And terror will also be for the human being's children, for fear, poison, and hopelessness will lie in wait for them, because the human being will only desire children for himself or herself and as their personal property, but no longer for the sake of life and children. Many children will become mere commodities, their bodies sold for labor, fornication, and self-enjoyment. Others will be hounded, tortured, beaten, and killed by their own parents and siblings or by degenerate child abusers. Even those children who are protected by their own will be threatened. And they will be poor in thought and feeling, and without knowledge, for they will live in false games and in delusions by which they will be seduced, because there will be no master by their side to instruct them in knowledge and wisdom. So no one will teach them to hope and to act, and to turn to the knowledge of the real truth. Thus the human being will be arrogant and think himself or herself to be the creation, although they will never be more than they were at birth, namely a human being. And the human being is in need of learning, which is why they have to learn a lot, in order to free themselves from their ignorance and from their unwisdom. But they will not be willing to learn, and will throw the teaching of the modern prophet to the winds, so that his words will go unheard as in the desert. Thus the human beings will remain in the old manner of behaving, and only a few will follow the words of the prophet. So the human being will continue to think they are creation, will continue to strike, will allow themselves to be overcome by rage and anger, by vengefulness and hatred, by lust for power, injustice, greed for gain, and jealousy. But by the might they will have seized over the animals, over nature, over human beings, and over life, they will feel strong and let their arm strike even further and, like a wild barbarian, destroy everything around them. Thus, in their thoughts and feelings, as well as in their mind and reason, they will remain a very small dwarf, although in some matters of progress they will possess the powers of a giant. So in this wise, they will progress with the steps of a giant, but will not know which way to take in the days to come, because they lack all knowledge and wisdom to do so. Although his or her head will be very heavy with knowledge they have acquired, it will be a knowledge of uselessness, because it is only based on values which are not of the spirit, and are not unified with the laws of creation, but are only based in human laws. Thus, in spite of all their knowledge, they will be very poor in true knowledge, for they will not know why they live and die. So they will continue to be the impetuous one, as they have always been, the one who wildly and stupidly waves their arms, speaks mad words, or whimpers softly, like a child still incapable of speech. Already in the second millennium after Emmanuel's birth, and even before the modern prophet will be born, a worldwide war will roll over the earth, and so it will be 2 years after his birth. But this will not be the end, for as of old, New greater and lesser wars will be everywhere, and will also carry themselves far into the third millennium. Whole countries in all four winds will become the spoils of war for degenerate greed for power, and countless human beings will be handed over to death in the process. Just as they will be through the cult of God, which will emerge madly and falsely from the teachings of the prophet Emmanuel, because they will fall prey to an unimaginable falsification. In their own lands, human beings will fight and cut each other's throats, and there will be wars between countries and believers in the cults of God. From the Hebraians will become Jews, and from them 12 tribes will branch off as believers in Allah. From Emmanuel's teachings will come a Christian cult, and both this and the Jews and the believers in Allah will not cease to war with each other until the third millennium after Emmanuel's birth. The earth will become a bloody battlefield all around, one of the reasons being that each cult of God shall be the correct one and the better one than the other. Thus, the believers of all God cults will imagine themselves to be in soul purity and in the only true faith, and will want to defend their erroneous faith. The believers of one God cult will confront the other believers of the other God cults with might and disputes, with hatred and revenge, as well as with suspicion, deceit, and murderous intent, whereby it will be inevitable that death will advance everywhere. And through all this evil, a great many human beings will also be deprived of human rights and life, for they will be deprived of all rights, given no bread and no roof. They will be the poorest of the poor and will have to walk naked, and for sale they will have only their own bodies. They will be outlaws and outcasts, far from all those who live in joy, glory, and abundance. But those who live in this manner of abundance will, in their guilt, growl and threaten the poorest, occupy their lands, and multiply groundlessly. They will very well hear the harsh and righteous words of the modern prophet, but they will be indifferent and fear no retribution. But their arrogance will one day collapse when the masses of the people become barbarians and storm the palaces of the rich. The rulers, the superiors, the mighty, and the rulers of the cult, and destroy, plunder, and seize everything. When the work of the modern prophet begins, human beings will already have entered an impenetrable labyrinth of fear, destruction, and Ausartung. Then his or her fear will close their eyes and ears so that they can no longer see or hear what is going on around them. His or her thoughts and actions will be full of suspicion, and fear and dread will accompany them at every step. But they will have no rest, because they will be constantly driven forward. But the voice of the prophet of the modern age will be loud, harsh, and just, that it must be heard by all. And it will also be heard by those who close their ears and pretend to be deaf. But many will hear the voice, but deny it, because they continue in the old behaviors and want to possess more and more. But they lose their heads to the illusions of the cults of God, and to those who want to be their masters through lies and falsehood. Thus human beings will be deceived by those who call themselves their shepherds, but there will only be bad shepherds. When the millennium comes to an end, when the modern prophet will have faded away, when 800 years will have passed after his death, human beings will finally be ready to open their eyes and ears so that they will see and hear. But this will be because the might of the prophet's word will begin to work for centuries and penetrate the thoughts and feelings as well as the reason of the human beings. It will be a very arduous work that the prophet and his faithful will have to accomplish, but their effort will not fail to reap the rewards. Thus human beings will slowly free themselves from the cults of God and turn to the truth of the Spirit and the creation. They will no longer be trapped with their heads in the erroneous teachings of the god cults and will have their eyes and ears open so that they can see and hear from one end of the earth to the other and now understand each other. They will have become aware that every blow that strikes the neighbor hurts and injures him. The human beings will form a great community of which each is a part of the other. True love will create peace and freedom and unite humankind. So, in addition to many languages, there will also be a special language which will be understood and spoken by all human beings. And this will finally be the beginning of the birth of that which is new, the truly human. And when the end of the millennium comes, human beings will have conquered the heavens and will fly out to the stars. They will also create stars themselves in the great dark sea of the sky, in which the stars twinkle. They will fly through the air and sky in shining great metal ships and go on long, distant journeys to seek a new home somewhere in the vastness of the sky. But the human being will also be the master of the waters and build great cities on the seas and then feed on the fruits of the seas. And the time will come when nothing will be forbidden to them, because they will live according to the laws of the creation. The new time will bring it that human beings will be able to communicate with each other without having to use the language of the mouth or the help of speaking tubes, for they will be able to receive and understand through their thoughts and feelings, and through their heads, all messages that another human being thinks and feels. And it will be that human beings will share dreams and live long. The age of human beings will be such as the ancient traditions spoke of the elders who lived to be 1,000 years old. And it is the time when the human being will know the secret of all things, such as the body of man and of animals, the secret of stones and of waters, the sight of every other human being. He or she will penetrate and know all mysteries, whereby they will push open one gate after another into the realm of the new life. The human being will become a powerful, creating and bubbling source of the new life, and all human beings will learn the knowledge of the creation. Reverently, the children of earth will look up to the firmament and fathom its secrets better than anyone before them. The human being's body will be stronger, larger, and more agile, and his or her thoughts and feelings and head will surround, understand, and possess all things. But all this will come to pass in the time of the life of the modern prophet, for his work will contribute much to it, even though it will be denied by envious people and those who want to know better. And he will also do much to ensure that the man will no longer be the only master, for he will work from a young age in order that woman will come to take the scepter and change the world for the better. Thus the woman will be the mistress of future times, for she is powerful and mighty, and will impose her will on men and create a better, more harmonious world in peace and freedom. The woman will ascend to become the mother of the millennium in the 3rd millennium after Emmanuel's birth. The woman will exude the gentleness and love, the harmony and peace of the true mother, and be the consummate beauty and love after the ugliness of barbarism and death-dealing wars. And the teaching of the prophet will contribute much to this, transforming the new time in its course into an easy time, where honest and true love and sharing, dreaming together and making dreams come true. And when this second birth comes true for the human being, the thoughts and feelings and the head will take possession of the mass of human beings who are one with each other in the love for the next one neighbor. That will be the end of barbarism, the end of wars, and the end of evil. It will be the dawning of a time of knowledge and wisdom, and will bring to human beings the true meaning of life, which the prophet of the modern age, in spite of assassination attacks on his life, will unflinchingly teach and carry out into the world. Through his teaching, the happy days will begin for human beings from modern times onwards, when human beings will find and walk on the path of peace, freedom, and the teaching of the Spirit, aka the creation energy teaching. Then the earth will have its order again. But for the time being, there will be only a few brave ones who will follow the words and the teaching of the prophet, and their way will be hard and arduous. So at first only a few faithful ones will distinguish themselves and earn their reward, but the time will come when they will multiply quickly and be in great masses all over the world. Already in the time of the new prophet, many paths will lead from one city to another, and from one end of the world to the other. And soon it will also be that the paths will lead through the firmament and will be endless. The withered green of the meadows and forests will be restored, the waters will be clean and pure again, and water will be brought into the deserts, in which everything will then be green and flourish. Soon the earth will be like a new garden, in which human beings will respect everything that grows and blossoms, everything that moves and creeps and flies. With zeal they will cleanse and keep clean everything they have soiled, and with love and joy they will regard the earth as their new home. Love, harmony, knowledge, and wisdom will become his or her own duty, and in knowledge and wisdom they will remember their life and their next lives and every day and every morning. Every human being will be like one even step among many, and he will know more about their own body and head and thoughts and feelings, and about the laws of life and creation than ever before. And the time will also come when evils and diseases will be recognized and cured before they can occur. And the human being will learn that they can prevent a great deal of evil and disease in themselves and also heal a great deal in themselves. But he or she will also learn that they must stand by and help the poor and the weak. This, however, not only out of necessity, but for the sake of charity and to uphold the whole of humanity. Thus, the human being will also open his or her heart and their purse to the poor and dispossessed, and leave behind the regrettable times of barbarism, avarice, and closed-mindedness. And when the new era finally dawns, the human being will at last see themselves in a correct wise as the guardian of human order, as the true guardian of the life, of the earth and its nature, together with all living things on it. For at that distant time, human beings will have learned to give and to share, and to turn away from taking to satisfy their own desire for gain. The human being will finally be a human being and no longer alone among all the many. His or her loneliness will be gone and over, and they will at last become knowledgeable in the real truth and laws of the creation and of life, death, and dying. All human beings will recognize each other and will no longer make any distinction between the different races, cults of God, and between the status of rich and poor. But all this will only happen after the worldwide wars and conflagrations, the evil atrocities of human beings, and after all the apocalyptic catastrophes caused by nature and the earth. Then new buildings and towers will arise from the charred ruins of cities and villages, but an iron fist will be needed to bring order to the chaos caused by human beings. And it will be of the greatest necessity that the prophet of the modern age will lift up his powerful word and bring the teaching of the truth and the teaching of the Spirit. For that will be the might that the human being will find the right path again. And through the new prophet's teaching, human beings will come to know that not only they, but all living beings are bearers of the Spirit and the light and creatures to whom respect must be paid. And when the human being knows this, then they will found new cities on the earth, on the waters, under the waters, and in the firmament, whither they will travel in silver metal ships. Thus, the human being will remember what once was, and thus they will know how to fathom what will be in the days and times to come. They will learn to understand procreation and birth and life, death and dying, and will lose all fear and dread of them, because they will turn to the teaching of the prophet. And the human being will have the time of several lives, because their age will be prolonged, and they will become knowledgeable that the light is never extinguished, and that life continues also in death and in revival. For their knowledge will become comprehensive wisdom. These, my friend, are Jeremiah's predictions for the end of the second millennium and the coming of the third.
These actually are not prophecies, but rather predictions, which will therefore fulfill themselves under all circumstances. Do you know whether there are also predictions or prophecies of other prophets, which we here on earth do not yet know or no longer know, because they have been lost?
Yes, there are such.
Could you also make these accessible for me?
Perhaps once at a later time. For today, anyhow, it must be enough, for my duty calls me again, which is why I must go now. Until we meet again, my dear friend.
Goodbye, but when will you come back?
It will take some time because I will be away for 2 months.
Then until then.